Hi, this is Dr. Melissa Gratias, and in today's organizing solution, I would like to introduce you to a friend of mine. Meet George. Say hello, George. Wait, George can't talk. That's because George is very, very dumb. So let's talk about George. I'm just kidding. George can be a friend, but George can also be an enemy. So let's have a little discussion here with my friend George, because I tend to find George in almost every client location with whom I work. I walk in and somewhere there is a George, which you would know as a paper organizer, and George may come in a variety of different fashions or configurations, but he's always just George to me. No matter what he looks like, he's George. George is purchased or acquired a lot of times because the thought is, if I have George, then I will be organized. I'll put things in these slots and it will make me organized. And so often the case is, George just ends up holding paper that long since should have been thrown away to begin with. So let's talk about when to use George and when to send George away. George is great if you have processes that can very easily be categorized, such as I have bills to pay, I have papers to give to this person, I have papers to give to that person, and the number of different actions that you take regularly is no greater or less than the number of slots you have in your George. So if I were to use this George for my action items, I would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different categories. The thing about it is, what happens if I have 6? Or what happens if category 1 only has 1 piece of paper in it, but category 3 has a whole 3-inch binder? George is not very flexible. George stays as wide as he is, and that's just how it is. You use what you got, and if you have more or less, then you're just out of luck. So only get a George if you look at it and you say, hey, I have 3 things that I do every day and I need 3 slots, and those are the perfect size for my items, and I want to keep it out. And here's the kicker: label these slots. That will help you tremendously. But otherwise, if you're just getting George because you say, oh, this looks good, this might help me organize my paper, more often than not, George ends up just holding stuff forever and ever, and you forget that he's even there. Now, for those of you who work in office configurations where you have bins at the top of your office, the bins where you pull up the door, George can actually be a really good helper for office supplies. Put George up in your bin and you will use the vertical space in there a lot more effectively than you would if you didn't have a George up in your bin. And he can hold office paper for your printer, envelopes, labels, all sorts of things. And then George is in his element when he's kind of holding stuff that's not really, not any more smart than he is. Office supplies are dumb, George is dumb, they go together well. So, if you have a George in your office, get to know him and have a conversation. Find out if George is really doing a job for you, or if George is just sitting there collecting items that really should have been thrown away a long time ago. This is Dr. Melissa Gratias with MBG Organizing Solutions. You can reach me online at www.mbgorganizing.com. Have a great day. You too, George.